So, very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition on I Have a Dream, India at 100. We're going to talk about unleashing the growth of the agricultural sector primarily, but of course, India cannot grow the way it needs to grow, or the country needs to be without this sector, which is so critical to the country. It's always been, and I'm sure it will continue to be, in the years ahead. And really, to anchor this conversation with us, we have none other than Mr. Ajay Shriram, who is the chairman and senior managing director of DCM Shriram. As we all know, it's a household name. The company with a large group turnover of over 1.2 billion in many areas. It's a leading conglomerate with a presence in India, Philippines, and many other parts of the world. Ajay, of course, is an expert in this subject, but more importantly, somebody who, as CII president, really led the agenda for Indian industry and Indian Inc., and really established a large part of the foundation building block for what CII achieved as a part of its India 75 program. And, I'm going to tap into Ajay's knowledge and experience over the last 15 years of his championing Indian industry and its role in not only in India, but in the world, also as a part of this conversation. He has, been conferred the degree, the honoris causa by the BML Munjal University. He has received Lifetime Achievement Award 2020 from the Indian Chemical Council. And I can go on. Ajay is chairman of the Board of Governors of the Indian Institute of Management in Simor, governing body of the Shriram College of Commerce, which he chairs. And he's been a member of the Board of Governors of many institutions in the past. And, especially when it comes to the agriculture industry, he's been the president and chairman of the International Fertilizer Industry, the Fertilizer Industry Association of India, and many other aspects which link industry in several ways with future development of the country, as well as, playing a key stakeholder in nation building. As CII president, as I mentioned, I think Ajay has made a very significant contribution both to Indian industry and to the country. So, real pleasure to have you here, Ajay, with us today and have this conversation, free-flowing chat on what we have achieved as a country and where we will go from here as we move towards the next 25 years. As our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister likes to call it the Amrit Kal for India. We've seen tremendous acceptance of India globally, especially in these last few years. The ability for India to create a new growth pattern both for the country as well as to be able to collaborate effectively with larger cross sections of the world to be able to establish ourselves more as a global leader. And as we step into this next 25 years, it would be lovely to get a sense from you is how do you dream of India at 100? Like when you go to bed and you were to get a dream, what do you see India at 100 like India of 2047? So maybe we'll start with that and take it from there.
Well, firstly, thank you, Rajan. Thank you very much for inviting me to this program and to share some thoughts with you. And thank you very much for your kind words in the introduction. Really appreciate that. That's really thoughtful of you. I think this is a very relevant topic indeed when we try to think of the next 25 years, because I think whether it's a company or whether it's a country, having some sort of a vision and some sort of a thinking for the future is very important to be able to start the steps and the activities to lead to that. But 4-5 areas which are of concern to me, which I sincerely hope we are able to do something very concrete to achieve that degree of achievement in the next 25 years. First and foremost, I sincerely hope we have jobs for everybody. I think that's a very crucial requirement for a country like India. Our demographics being what it is, where 65% of our population is below the age of 35. And if I'm not mistaken, approximately 50% are below the age of 25. So the job requirement over the next 20, 25, 30 years is going to be very acute. And I sincerely hope that we're able to create jobs. For that, we require a tremendous focus on the education side, but not on regular college education like we normally talk about. But I think we have to learn from companies like Germany and others, where the focus on vocational training is very strong, on practical hands-on training is very strong, by which people can get jobs, not in areas where you require a BCom or a BSc or things of that type, but where the requirement in India is very high. So I hope the education side of vocational training is given adequate attention and is really pushed. So people at all levels and all geographies can get that sort of a training. Consequently, I sincerely hope there is no extreme poverty when we come to 2025, because we have to do a lot of activities to come to that stage. Every country in the world has its challenges, there's no doubt. I'm sure India will too. But I think if you are able to work towards providing an economic environment and educated people who can get the jobs, I think that will be a very positive thing. Another area I think which is really required is approach towards growth in a sustainable manner. I think sustainability is something we can't forget. We are seeing the weather pattern changes all over the world, even now. And it's worrying what's going to happen down the line. The uncertainty is very high. So I think we have to be able to manage our own environment and be conscious of how we are acting in a sustainable way. I would also say India has the potential, tremendous potential, because of our manpower and our intellect in our population, to be a leader in the world in the innovation space and in the technology space. I think these are some areas where our people have excelled. Many of them have excelled outside India, very actively, very aggressively. How do we push that within India? I think, that scope is also tremendous. I hope that happens. And last but not least, there are many points, but, I don't want to keep carrying on that way. I think what is required in a very focused way is a gender balance, a gender equity. I think that is somehow it has not got enough prominence and importance in various areas where it should get. So I sincerely hope that's an area which is also focused. And by India at 100, we have a good gender balance so that we have equity among men and women across the board. I think
yeah, of course, no, great points. And I think the key word I picked there, Ajay, is inclusivity, because you're saying jobs for all, skills training, no poverty, gender inclusivity, growth with sustainability. But, the innovation and technology piece that you talked about, right? I think, what you rightly said, Indians are creating that value globally everywhere in the world. It's high time we did it in India, and we probably do it in areas, where we can make a massive difference on a larger scale, right? So when we look at agriculture, for example, it is definitely one of the key pillars of our economy, and I think offers tremendous growth opportunities. I mean, in many, many ways, if we can get our technology piece right there. So do you have any thoughts on how we can use technology better, because through your companies, maybe you have already done so, and a larger thing on how do we get better momentum, particularly in the next 5 years, right? Because I think that opportunity comes in the budget. If you remember, there was a discussion on a public digital stack on agri-tech, on agriculture also, which I think will give rise to a lot of innovation. So would love to get some thoughts from you on how technology will play a key role there.
See, you're right. Agriculture for India is a very crucial industry, where today we have almost 140 crore families, 14 crore families who bank on agriculture. So if you take it 5 members per family, the numbers are very large indeed. Unfortunately, due to the population and due to the spread of land, approximately 82% plus own less than 2 hectares of land. So that's a very big challenge. How do we get them to understand the technology and the needs of how to have really productive agriculture? About 60-65% of population live in rural India. So, they need an income level, and agriculture is where all this can come from. So you're absolutely right. Agriculture today, which contributes to about 17-18% of our GDP, can go higher by getting into technology in a much more aggressive and much more focused manner. It's good to see activities have started. There's no doubt. But I think with this large number of farming community members, one requires a contact with them in some concerted way to be able to share knowledge and input how to improve agricultural output and productivity, which will give them a better income. Ultimately, the objective is to give them a better income. A couple of things where the farmers lose out today. Today, there are between 6 to 8 different middlemen for a lot of the agricultural output, and the farmer gets barely 20 to 25% of the consumer price. We have to do something there. We have to use technology for better market linkages so that the farmers can sell directly to a corporate or to some other level where you don't have to go through many small people and the farmer loses out. I think the second area where one requires focus, which can help the farming community a lot, is having tie-ups with the corporate sector. And there are examples which are available in India, abundance. Like, I mean, we are involved in the sugar industry. We've seen how the sugar industry, the contact with the farmers, our communication with them on agriculture practices, when to supply the sugarcane, etc., gives them a tremendous advantage of being able to supply a fresh crop which has more weight than a crop which is cut and left in the fields for a couple of days, so it loses weight. They lose out on that. I'm happy to state that in the sugar industry in our areas, I mean, the range, the yields per hectare range from 50, 55 tons to over 200 tons. And that's because of the technology being shared with the farmer and the farmer absorbing and implementing it. So I think there's a lot of, and this is where corporates can play a very major role in using technology to help farmers improve their yields, consequently improve their incomes. Government moved very actively on FPOs, farmer producer organizations. That's a very strong forum and a strong body which can connect with the farming community for the input side and for the output side. So there again, if the FPOs were to work in a consolidated manner to sell the produce to bulk users rather than small mandiwalas, the farmers can get a better realization. So I think FPOs can also play a very major role in how to help. One area I'm very passionate about, I keep talking about everywhere, where farming community has to do more. Everyone has to, but so does farming, is water conservation. I think that is a very big challenge in the country. Today, approximately 70% of our water is used in agriculture, but barely 10 to 20% is used effectively. The rest drains away. How do we use drip irrigation? How do we use land leveling? There are so many technologies available to conserve water and optimize water. I think that requires something which will be an asset for the long term for every citizen of India. I mean, I'm worried that 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, there'll be wars over water. Not only India, but in the world. One has to do something very concrete on that side. On the technology side, again, it's good to see drones are coming in now. You know, we ourselves have started working with our farmers and providing on a contract basis where they can rent mechanization, rent drones, etc. for spraying. It's in the very initial stages, but it is happening and it can go a lot more. Mechanization can go a lot more for applying the various fertilizers, inputs in a more focused way, spraying them so that they get absorbed through the leaves. You know, that can all help in terms of yield, help in terms of productivity, and reduce the cost to the farmer. So I think that's another area where a lot of work can be done. Soil management is another very crucial area where one has to have the technology which is available to test the quality of soil, give it the right fertilizers so you get optimum yield. You know, my whole thinking is ultimately we need to work towards improving farmers' incomes. If the farmer's income goes up with a better crop output, better crop yield, better delivery to the customer, it's a win-win across the board. So I think this is where technology of all types, even today, we are using WhatsApp messaging with all our sugarcane farmers, over 200,000 of them, or when to supply sugarcane to the factory, etc. It's only going to grow when the youngsters come into it. So technology's scope is tremendous and it's catching on, but it has to move faster.
Yeah, you know, I think what you're saying is this real-time access to data and real-time kind of, you know, improvements in so many of the areas that you talked of, because I think all of them are are so important. One of the things, Ajay, that is always a little worrying is that when we look at the credit facilities that are supposed to go out, to the farming community, we say we'll target 18%, but I think as of in 2021, it was just about 10.5% being directed to the agriculture sector. I think, is there some reason why that is happening? Can multiple stakeholders come together? Because today, technology innovation over these public infrastructure, digital stats, etc., will happen, I strongly believe, by that young rural farmer, like what you talked of, right? Where there is a ground level innovation that they probably can amplify, scale for not only for India and the world. Do you see, those kinds of either credit or other maybe, equity investments like the startup world, etc., going into this sector from, as time moves on?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I think whether it's startups or I would say existing corporate sector also have a tie-up with the farming community. They can also help the farmers get credit at the time of need and repay it after the crop comes out and they're able to sell it. But there has to be a mechanism where there's trust between the farming community and where they can get the money from in a seamless way. I think that effort has to go in a little bit. But just to give an example of corporates, we have tied up in our sugar business with banks, where farmers can go to the banks to get a loan during the course of the growth of the crop. And we've taken the guarantee that after they've signed the loan and signed an agreement with us, we will repay the bank out of the cane money, the money we have to pay the farmer for sugarcane. So it's a win-win across the board.
Sure.
We can do a lot more credit, which can be done. Startups which are working in rural areas, they have a good connect. They can play a major role with the banking system also, or with other lending mechanisms which are coming up now to give them the money. And advance giving and settling against their crop is a very tenable, practical solution. But it has to be in an organized way. It can't be ad hoc that, because today very often mandis, etc., they take the crop, they're standing there for 2 days, 3 days, not knowing who they'll sell it to at what price. I think this way government has to also come in. They are giving a lot of loans to the farming community, but come in to give it a more organized structure and flavor.
Yeah.
So that the farmers can get the money and get the price for their crop. That's what is a big challenge for the farming community also.
No, and we got to scale this, right, across what you said, across all types of farmers, to be able to truly unlock this potential. We say India is a global food bowl, right? It's going to be, because let's face it, our relationship with food in India linked through agriculture is very different from most societies, right? I mean, when we see how it is, and I think, it's a very futuristic goal that India will, ensure food security, not only for our own people, but to a large extent can become a large food supplier to the world, and as we see that, I think we need to get our overall strategy right. So any thoughts on strategic things that we can do across multiple stakeholders, right? Is there government's role? Is there private sector? Is there civil society? I don't know. Is there some multilateral work globally that we need to do to ensure that we can at least unlock this strategy?
I think, it is combined definitely. Ultimately, end of the day, the farmer has to buy his inputs from somewhere or someone and sell his output to someone. How do we get that connect going all the way? On the input side, the potential for better quality seeds, timely availability of fertilizers, the knowledge of how to apply water at what time of the day or night or year or month, whenever is required. I think that's when technology and knowledge has to come in a very focused manner. So farmers actually utilize that time to improve their yield and get the output. I think that is something very important. And coming back on the output side, I think, again, this is where the tie-up with corporates can play a very positive role in giving them an income. There are so many, like I was mentioning, sugar. You take the sugar industry, take the dairy industry, some of the fruits manufacturers. Some of these are really giving the farmers an assured income, which is a very forward-looking approach to give them a sense of security. I think where we need to do a lot more is an area like food processing. That is something where the farmer can be a beneficiary, corporates can manage it correctly and get their returns, and the country gains on exports. It's a win-win across the board. But we need to do a lot more on that. But in agriculture, Rajan, one of the biggest issues is India today is 29 states and 8 union territories. Agriculture is a concurrent subject. So ultimately, the final decision on what is to be done is taken by the state. And that is where there is each state has their own policies due to various tugs, pulls, or their own priorities, whatever they are. I would feel like Mr. Arun Jaitley, when he was finance minister, set up the GST Council, which had all the finance ministers of all the states of India. I think if the central government were to set up an agriculture council and make that a forum to discuss periodically certain policy issues for agriculture, which affects the entire farming community and every consumer too, across the board, I think that will be a positive outcome in some time of getting an alignment, which can be a win-win for the states also. So I think some coordinated working like this for sharing policies, sharing what to do, what not to do, technology transfer solutions, learning from each other states where each one is doing better. I think some of these can be very positive for actual economic growth on the agriculture front.
No, and especially as we look at the new age agricultural sector, right? What we were talking earlier, which will actually start separating some of the states from the others, right? Because I think as technology starts to play a deeper role, we always find that, there is a winner takes it all kind of a thing. And I think maybe it can increase competitiveness among states, but more importantly, I think that's a great point for us to take back, even as CII, as in India at 100 in our vision document, on how do we create a framework and a collaborative platform for multiple policymakers to come together, not only to understand, best practices globally, but also to work amongst one another to see how we can ensure that, the good practices go. But, regulatory wise, there are agriculture has its own little regulatory framework, and you're right, different states and all, because it's also somewhat a political subject because it involves large numbers of people. How do you really see this? Is there any policy support or something that you feel that can resonate across, the country that can work when it comes to shaping this new age sector particularly?
When we talk to people in the government, in a couple of states which I've been and in the center, of course, everyone talks very positively that they want the productivity to go up, farmer income to go up. The second part is in any sector, anywhere in the world, one will always have black sheep. That's a given of human nature. So when I was involved with CII more vocally on various government platforms, etc., I should say that, yes, there are black sheep, but please don't make every policy to catch hold of that 5%, 10% black sheep. Someone who does wrong, please penalize, definitely. But make the policy such by which, you look at it of ease of doing business. It shouldn't become that because one person out of 5 or 7 or 10 has done something wrong, you change the entire law to make it so rigid that it becomes much more difficult for people to implement. Especially if you take the farming community, where, for them, even to understand, get into nitty-gritty is not easy. It's not easy. So how can one ease it up? How can one open it up and give the options to people? And I have seen one more thing, Rajan. The farming community and the people in these are very intelligent people who know what's good for them. They may not have a degree from a college, or they may not have a, class 10 result, but they know what's good for them and what's not. And they have their priorities very clear. Coincidentally, just to share with you, we have agriculture research laboratory in Ludhiana. And I was there yesterday.
Okay.
I went to the fields, and there we saw the fields of farmers, and you see the quality of the crop they've grown. It's fantastic. So they've got the inputs, they've done what they, the point is, do they have the right forum to sell it at a reasonable price? I think these are some things which require more input.
No, you're absolutely. We have to keep that farmer at the center of the sector's growth, right? We got to figure out how we keep the farmer at the center. How do we build policy around it? Like what you said, because the positivity of the farmers, I mean, like what you say is there. And unfortunately, Ajay, what tends to happen, we see these small pockets of excellence, like what you mentioned, your visit yesterday, and we see that across India. Somehow it's not getting scale, because of whatever reason. And maybe there's another opportunity for us while we provide a collaborative platform for policymakers, even for farmers, to probably share, a lot more. I don't know who will do that, how can that happen? But if we can have, strong platforms where farmers can benefit from each other, and we've seen that cooperative movement work sometimes very well in India in at least some of the sectors. But some innovative thoughts there, and maybe India Inc. can just support some of these initiatives, right? So, any thoughts on further what corporates and what India Inc. can do, particularly CII, especially if we are looking at this sector?
When I think back, the 3 laws which the government of India at the central level wanted to implement on the agriculture front, unfortunately, they did not go through. But one of them was a more open, communicative way of working with corporates. I think that is where the farmers are losing out. Definitely are losing out. And there could be whatever reasons, vested interests, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But I think if they can have a tie-up with the corporate world, and if they don't, I am 100% sure that if any corporate was to cheat a farming community or a village or a district, the government will not let the corporate go. They will definitely catch them, which they should. You made a commitment, go by it. I think these are things where there's a requirement of the corporates to get more deeper involved with the farming community to make it a win-win. Government has done a lot, but there's never any end to it. What more you can do? Government has some fantastic agriculture universities all over India. Some of them are bringing out tremendous products, whether seeds or soil management techniques on XYZ. How do we push that to the last mile to the farmer? This is where technology comes in. Like I was saying, in our sugar business, we are getting farmers who've got over 200 tons per hectare, compared to average 50, 60, 70, because of technology. And they've taken the interest, of course. They have to have the passion, of course. But then they've taken the effort to get the knowledge and implement it. So I think this is where the government can come in the government can come in a corporate, and government can come in terms of development. Third, I think where the research which is required today for better quality seeds, better quality inputs, I think these are things which can also be a tremendous asset for the farmers and for the country. I'll give you an example. Let's take cotton. Cotton seed, GM cotton was allowed over the last 10 years, 12 years ago. The output went up 3 times. India became a major exporter of cotton. But in the last year or two, there's a shortage of cotton, we become an importer. Because the seed quality and development, and there were some hitches here and there and developing types of seeds, which led to our situation. How do we provide, let's take GM, for example. Today, GM is there, I think 18 or 19 different types of crops, which have GM seeds. And it's grown in 25, 30 countries all over the world for the last 20 years. I'm really glad this government has opened up and said, you do the experiments and work towards getting that. We need to do that much faster. It's a win-win across the board. So I think this is where the corporate sector, government, technology growth, research and development, all of them have to come together to ultimately reach, and where the FPOs can play a very major role, the farmer producer organizations, because they are like a cooperative. So they are like a membership, and they can, communicate with them and share with them what to do, what not to do. So I think the scope is tremendous.
No, I think you very well articulated the role of multiple stakeholders, to make that happen. I think key to that, Ajay, is building that trust, right? Yeah. And we all know trust doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes daily commitment, sticking to what you commit on a daily basis, winning that, rather than it coming naturally. And I think as we are able to build these trusted ecosystems, hopefully around, the agricultural sector and keeping the farmer's interest at core, like what you rightly said, I think it will become a win-win for corporates in any case and every other agency involved, because if the farmer is well incentivized to deliver the outcomes, I think everybody benefits, what you
Just give
rightly
you an
said. Yeah.
example, if I may.
Yeah.
Of the sugar industry in our company, 96, 97, 98. Rajan, when we went for the first time, when we put up our factory and were starting, the farmers used to come in clothes which were virtually torn. They didn't even have a bicycle.
Yeah.
Within 5 years' time, the farmers started coming in bicycles and motorcycles. Within another couple of years' time, they started coming in cars. We saw the quality of the houses change. We saw suddenly antennas on top of the house for television. Well, I'll give you an example. I was talking yesterday, I went to Ludhiana on a lighter vein, but that's a fact. We drove through a village to go to the field where we are doing our trials. I was amazed to see in this village, there was a shop which had written outside their beauty parlor. I'm saying that's the aspiration of our youth today.
Yeah.
Do we give them the wherewithal, the technology, the inputs to fulfill their aspirations?
No, and the exposure today is so much more, right, than the past. So it's not that people are not exposed to that. The smartphone in the hands of every person enables you to tap into the world the way you want to. Internet has changed the exposure. So what you say is, I think it's making it easier to be able to, at least understand the aspirations. But obviously, as the aspirations go higher, we have to find ways to connect that. But that's the beauty of this, journey of India to 100, because I don't think there's any other country, Ajay, in the world which has such a large youth population, which will become a part of the employable global workforce.
Correct.
What you rightly said, at a time when, the rest of the world is aging, including China. And I think this is our window, it's literally, in the history of mankind, you won't find a country of 1.4 billion people transforming itself, from an underdeveloped. So I think the excitement and potential is so much. It's just about, getting the things right. And, as we move on this journey, Ajay, what are some of the other sunrise sectors? Like we've talked, extensively about agriculture because it's so important and critical. But I want to spend these next, 12 to 15 minutes that we have to tap into some of the other things. So any other sunrise sectors that you feel, which are critical from an India standpoint, where we can become, the leading global player in the next 25 years? What do we strengthen? How do we look at it? Any thoughts around some of the other sectors?
I think one is outside agriculture now, not necessarily agriculture, but I think in general. I think one, the potential for India to become a manufacturing hub for the world is tremendous. We are stuck at the 16, 17% for some years now. I sincerely hope India at 100, we are at least 25% of the larger GDP level. That's the important point. It's good to see the investments happening, good to see the priorities happening. There is, of course, again, work to do state-wise, center-wise on ease of doing business. That's an activity CI is deeply involved with, as you're aware. We are discussing with government very proactively, and they are listening very proactively, seeing how they can work on it. But there is a lot to be done. I think that's one area where there's a lot need to be done. Second is, I think, what I mentioned earlier, is in terms of AI and ML and technology. I think that is something India can definitely be a source of strength for the world in terms of giving that technology out and sharing, for making it applicable in virtually all sectors so that it becomes an ease, for not only cost-wise, but ease of doing it, but also for the quality management side, delivery side. I think another area where India needs to focus is on the logistics side of management in the country. I think today we are not the most competitive in the world. We need to do a lot more of that. The focus on infrastructure is strong. We are seeing that, which is very positive. But I think the entire thing of supply chain management, the costs of logistics, etc., we are still much higher than many other countries. I think we need to do something there also very proactively. Another area is climate change. I think that is something where we are seeing the impact of that across the world today. India will feel it too. It has felt it, but it will feel it and can feel it more compared to who would ever dream of what we're seeing in Europe or America or Australia, things of this type. We have to be very careful, and I think we have to be very conscious of how we want to work on some of these things. On some areas of agriculture, if I may say so, is the biological side, where we don't have to have only chemical fertilizers, but how to get biological fertilizers and stimulants and inputs, which can help farmer produce the output and productivity. That can be a very good area. Some focus on some areas. Today, India imports almost 75 to 80,000 crores worth of oils and oil seeds. How do we get that into our own portfolios here and we don't have to import it? And today what's happening is cotton seed oil, etc., we import. It's all GM, cotton seed oil. Why can't we do it over here and grow it and save that foreign exchange? Pulses is another area where we are importing 12, 14,000 crores a year. How do we get that into our own economy so we don't have to import it? So it's a matter of saving imports as well as expanding exports. I think the potential in India is huge on many, many fronts, but someone has to have the passion to take it up. All these things, corporates, government, we've seen even in government, we've seen a couple of ministries, what phenomenal work they've done here. I mean, it's absolutely amazing and hats off to them, what they've achieved. But we need to do it across the board.
Yeah, no, I think what you rightly said, the alignment around all of these, both thoughts, initiatives, cutting imports, expanding our export footprint at a time when the world is anyway looking, at an alternative to China and other parts of the world. We always say, hopefully by India at 2047, the world will talk about an India plus one strategy, not the other way around, for which, what you rightly say, competitiveness in our manufacturing sector has to come, right? And I think everything, infrastructure, logistics, will help that. And I still remember, even in your CII president days, that was a very strong emotional point for you as well, that, we see the chance, we see our ability to improve our manufacturing share of GDP, really, yes. What can we do to make it happen, right? And I think hopefully we are on that journey and that path,
Again, one more point which I mentioned earlier, that with our 29 states and 8 union territories, if I recollect, for the economic growth part of it, there are 47 different acts and rules which are concurrent subjects, which means ultimately the state has a final authority for the decision-making power. So I think this is where each state has to take it up first, or in some coordinated manner to sell it to the states, where something needs to be done.
Yeah. No, I think competitiveness of states also, we keep seeing these different reports, surveys, the investor weeks that we see. So we're seeing states also being extremely proactive on attracting the right investment, into the states. And I think that part is shaping up. But to the larger point is, how do we really increase that manufacturing as a percentage of the enhanced GDP? Will require some, innovation in both implementation, thought processes, and hopefully, we'll be able to crack that collectively, and maybe also get Indian corporates and global investors who are coming into India to take a little more risk, as sometimes, we say we're not as risk-taking probably as the West and other countries that have thrived on innovation. Even our R&D spends as a private sector is far below global standards. So maybe that could be some shift, but many things can aid that process. But it's interesting times, definitely. Another point I want to talk about, Ajay, is there are so many other areas in India, right, that need to shape up, especially ones that, are driven both by the corporate sector, but also through philanthropy and, NGOs and other, institutions that are built for public good. And I know you and your DCM Shriram and the CSR, piece of your group is deeply committed towards programs in education, rural development, of course, which is quite core to your business, but, vocational livelihood development, healthcare, sports, for example, is something that you promote. So how does the CSR side, how does philanthropy, both corporate, individual, time, skills, money. How does all of that come together, in our new India of 100, if you were to imagine, how do you see that play out?
I think it's a very important area, Rajan, which needs to be looked at. If I may say so, for our group, I'm going back over 100 years. When Sir Shriram was the one who actually was running the industry, and it was in 1926 that he started Shriram College of Commerce. He started industry after that, but on the philanthropy side, whether it's colleges, whether it's art centers, Bharati Kala Kendra or Shriram Center for Art, etc., or now the next gen has done the Shriram School. I think all these are moving very proactively. And I think our family philosophy is very much to give back to society. I think that's something which is there right from day one. And we've all seen it as we've grown up in the company, of how the approach and attitude of our elders has been towards society around us. I started my career in the sugar industry. In the sugar industry, one sees how one has to work with the farmers, has to go to the villages, and how you can improve their livelihood. So, it starts literally from the exposure which I think all of us have got as members of the family, to see how we can give the right focus and attention. So our company also has very actively got into, as you rightly said, in terms of villages. We are focusing more of areas where we are located, because there we have, one, a better control on the activities, can monitor it, can ensure delivery. Most important is not only set it up. For instance, we've taken in our Kota region, putting up toilets all over in a very extensive manner. But you have to manage it and get the local society and the villagers and the schools to manage it, so that it becomes a continuing maintenance. It should not become a go down, after a year or 2 years. So one has to keep that activity going to get the mindset change, which is required very actively. As I mentioned a little earlier, I think water is something which we consider to be very important for us because of the nation. So whether it's making water bodies, collecting water, conserving water, pushing drip irrigation, pushing land leveling so that water is not lost while doing agriculture, how to do proper growth of trees and gardens within small towns. We've done it in Kota, we're doing it in our Gujarat areas. All that, how do we make life better and a greener sustainability side of it, if you look at it. That's also a very important area which needs to be looked at. So I think we've got these 5-6 areas which because we have separate divisions, each one sort of focuses what is required in their zone and their areas. We are actively involved. But I think at a macro level, looking at the villages, upgradation, education side, health side, water side, I think these are areas where we are committed to growing, committed to making it effective so that the society around us gets the benefit and they live a better life down the line. I think that's something which you have to continuously keep doing.
No, I think the next 25 years, Ajay, are going to require many more like you, to believe in the difference that they can make, to society, particularly, given where you started, right? You want a poverty-free India. We want a, job for everyone. We have to invest beyond what is, possible to make that happen. And I must tell you, Ajay, it's interesting. There are many interesting initiatives around philanthropy and giving, especially with new age wealth creators who have come in, who want to deploy a large part of their wealth that they've created as effectively as they build businesses into the, and I think that trend is also changing. And someone like you has been doing it for over about nearly 100 years, but smaller families which might have smaller amounts to put, but that buck can go that much further if it is supported through very interesting means. So I think it's an exciting time, especially when it comes to India and what all we can achieve. but how do you see the next gen, the message for youth? Because you started with that, and maybe 45 minutes have just run by. We can keep talking, but on a closing note, what's your message to the young people of this country? What's your message to different stakeholders of India for these next 25 years? Anything in particular you'd like to, share?
Just some thoughts. It's an interesting question. Thoughts which come to mind is that ultimately, I do feel that if society around you and the industries around you prosper, everyone prospers. I think trying to move in a selfish way is not the right direction to achieve sustainable long-term results. One has to, whether it's business, I do feel business and growth of business is so crucial for the Indian economy. It ultimately provides jobs. It actually gives a growth to the GDP. It gives income to the government. It actually is a win-win across the board. So each one should look at how they can contribute to the nation in their own area of passion and interest to be able to achieve their satisfaction by pursuing their passion, at the same time contributing to the nation. I think that's important. Because, the reality is when you go from here, when you go upstairs, you go with nothing. So what is it you can do while you're here, which can, make life happy for yourself and for people around you, so that it's a better society at the end of the day, So my message to everyone is that think a little bigger, think a little wider, think a little more nationalistic to see how one can move forward to give the country a better footing and a sounder footing for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And if each one think positive, I think we can all contribute. So I'm an optimist. So I think being an optimist, I do feel that whatever one does will lead to something more positive down the line. And I sincerely hope people believe in optimism and doing something positive. There will be positive results at the end of the day.
Totally agree. I share your optimism. So that makes two of us, and that will be infectious and make others. But such a beautiful point, the same Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which Prime Minister Modi has taken as a G20 theme, for not only India, but I think collective progress of the world will happen if we really think of the world as a whole and really invest to make sure that every person on earth, benefits from the others who have already probably benefited a little more, and make sure that, we leave behind a better world. So again, Ajay, thank you so much for such a enriching and, enlightening conversation, and look forward to holding you committed to some of the things you said, and we'll continue to look up to you and take your inputs as we move forward over the next 25 years on this journey for India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajan, for inviting me to share some thoughts and giving me this opportunity to share my ideas and thoughts a little bit. And I look forward to working with you and with CII and your committee to carry forward whatever we can for the benefit of the people and the nation of India. Thank you very much.
Likewise, look forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.